Hello and welcome to the Men of Action podcast, where we bring on stellar men who are high quality, men who have overcome the odds, men who felt like a zero till they recognize that hero inside them, that warrior inside them, to take on life, to become the best versions. And today, I'm bringing the Default Kings to the podcast, and I got Joey, who's a Default King, an OG member. So, Joey, what's going on, man?
What's up, brother? How are you doing, man?
Doing well, doing well. Why don't you tell us a little about yourselves?
Yeah, man. So I'm the co-owner of Default Kings. So we're an online fitness coaching company. We specialize in helping men change their default actions, which we define as the subconscious habits that you do throughout the day. And really, the main objective that we have there is helping guys change those habits so they can ultimately transform their body. Right. Majority of our guys are weight loss guys. We have a few guys that are looking to just do overall recomposition, but typically the guy we see roll through about 50 pounds overweight, got about 10% of their body fat that they could drop down. And yeah, man, that's what we specialize in. We've been doing it for about 3 years. I joined the company a little over a year ago, known Jack and Gabe for like a year and a half now. Those are my business partners. But yeah, man, that's what there is to know about me so far. Obviously, I'm sure we're gonna get into some of the backstory there and how that came about. But that's the 1 minute rundown of who I am and what I do.
Hey, that's good, man. Run down the Default Kings fitness online program for all your needs.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah.
All right.
And you've
So
been through it
how'd
too.
you get involved in fitness, Joey?
What was that?
How'd you get involved in fitness?
Oh, dude, it was pretty organic for me. It's pretty organic for me. I grew up playing sports. Both my parents are physical therapists, so I was kind of thrust into the world of just exercise science and kinesiology and all that stuff from a young age. I was the kid on the sports team where if somebody got hurt, my parents were down on the sidelines checking out somebody's knee or hip or arm or whatnot, right? Like that was what I grew up around. My mom would treat patients out of our house, right? So I just grew up around it. And then obviously being involved with sports naturally transitioned me to the weight room. The older I got, the more involved I got with the weight room. And ultimately, the whole idea of fitness for me just started out of a desire to just be better at my sport. I played soccer at a pretty high level growing up. I ended up playing in college as well. And that was really the natural progression for me because I was just like, man, this is going to make me better at my sport. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get more athletic. And then you had all of the other benefits that come with just being in shape, whether that be the confidence, things along those lines as well. So pretty organic flow into fitness for me. Ended up studying exercise science in college as well before leaving school to just pursue the business full time. So yeah, man, pretty natural progression. I tell people I was kind of born into this world, given the fact that my parents were both in the field.
Yeah, it's awesome. Always being involved in something you can take from. Not many people can say that they did something as a child, they loved it, and they went to pursue it. Like that, you actually took time to pursue your dreams. And obviously, the college route was one option, but you decided, let's go a different route to actually pursue more flexibility and freedom into how you want to coach people into the health and wellness, especially when you're saying that most people are about 50 pounds overweight, to help them drop down that weight by changing their default actions.
100%, man. Yeah, 100%, man. It was definitely one of those not so easy conversations to have with your, college educated parents that both have master's degree in the field that you were pursuing and telling them, hey, I'm not going to be going to school anymore. So that was definitely.
You gotta mention that conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, that was definitely an interesting conversation to have. But it all worked out ultimately, right?
I'm glad that you kind of did it to pursue what really makes you happy and to help other people like lose weight and keep the weight off.
100%. Yeah. Now a few years removed from that decision, like they totally get it, right? They totally understand now. But definitely at the time that it happened, they were a little concerned, right? They were like, what do you mean you're dropping out of school? What do you mean you're doing this? You got internships, you're doing good with all this stuff. And I wasn't a bad student at all, right? I was kind of I tell people I was kind of a bookworm, right? Like I was the kid that had the high GPA, high ACT score, all that stuff. I was good at school. So for them, it was like really silly for me to leave school because they're like, you're good at this. You could easily get into a good graduate school and go get a good job and everything. But it just became glaringly obvious to me that it wasn't the route that was laid out for me. It wasn't the one that was predetermined for me, So yeah, man, it was a super interesting conversation, especially given the fact that they were on the exact same path that I was initially pursuing.
Mm. So I guess what's kind of the starting basis to help people kind of begin to change their default actions?
Dude, I mean, it starts with identity, right? Ultimately, I think a lot of people, what they don't realize is a lot of the actions that you take on the day-to-day are purely a result of the beliefs and the identities that you hold, right? The subconscious things that are going on between your ears. If you believe one thing, you're going to act in accordance with that, right? If you identify with one thing, you're going to act in accordance with that. A very common thing that we have guys say when they join is like, I'm lazy. Well, they act lazy because they believe they're lazy and they identify with being lazy. That's the entire reason that you're acting that out. And the things that you act out ultimately become your reality, right? The actions that you take are ultimately what cause the real life circumstances that you have. So it really starts between the ears. Everybody that comes into the program, the very first thing that they do is they go through some mental frameworks to help them reverse those identities and those beliefs that they hold. And then the next step going through that is how do we actually take actions in the day to day to align with those identities and those beliefs and these things that we want to become. Where do we want to be at the end of this program? Where do we want to be for the rest of our life? We have to align the things that we're doing in the day to day with those new identities that we're trying to step into. So it really starts between the ears, man.
I love it. I love it. It's definitely having mindset's everything. If your mindset's not consistent and, again, developing the identity of who you want to become, then, it's tough luck, unfortunately. And it's changing a mindset, I'm sure, as you know, is not the easiest at all.
No, not at all, man. Especially when it's something that a lot of the guys that go through the program, and like you were in the program yourself as well. So I don't know if the listeners know that. So like you went through the program yourself. And you met a lot of the guys that were in there. Is like these are things that they've been battling for decades. That's not something that switches overnight, right? It's something that if you're not careful about, could very easily revert back to what you were thinking about beforehand, right? So it's not an easy journey by any means, right? It is relatively simple. There's not a lot of steps involved in it, but it's by no means easy, right? It is a hard process because it's change. Any kind of change is uncomfortable. So yeah, dude, 100%.
Yeah, but as we both have come to kind of learn over the years of like working with people, it's the only area to really grow in is facing discomfort. And once you face that comfort and get out of that comfort zone, that's where the real growth and the real challenges really come about.
100%. I think it's where you kind of find your character as well when you're faced with adversity, when you're faced with challenges. That's ultimately where you find who you actually are. Because like everybody is one thing when it's easy, you know what I mean?
Right.
And when things get difficult, that's really when, in my opinion, true colors come out, right? Whatever the situation is, whether it be physical discomfort, mental discomfort, circumstantial discomfort, whatever it may be, that's when you really find out who you really are.
Right. Yeah, just as someone who went through the program, I mean, what really helped was having like I know back then it was on Telegram. I know you guys went to Slacker, I want to say.
Yeah.
So I know just like having that whole community and that support community of people who also going through what you're going through to lose weight. Because I've always struggled with like weight gain, weight loss constantly, but that's because my sphere of influence was mostly around people who were not really in shape. People who got out of shape, never stayed in shape, don't really care about exercise. So, but that's why I like Twitter, because that's my whole feed. It's like all these like guys who like love to eat 4 or 5 eggs, steaks and everything, and like are jacked and exercise. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do this. So, and just learning even more about the art of working. Like I've always worked out, but what you guys helped a lot was again just that, like, and this was Jack's thing, was like that sacred time where I had to like constantly like tell myself, okay, this is a sacred time, and like finding those key words were like extremely helpful. Now I'm like, if I go 2 days without going to the gym now, like I'm itching. Like it's like a rash that doesn't go away till like I'm in the gym.
Yeah, man. It's a default action, baby. It's installed.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's installed, right? And that's what I compare it to people. I'm like, think about when you were a kid and your parents had to tell you to go and brush your teeth, right? Like you didn't want to. And they're like, no, go brush your teeth, Zach. Go brush your teeth. Go brush your teeth. And then finally you started doing it. And after a while, it's just a thing that you do without thinking about, right? It's literally a default action. Your parents don't have to call you now, Zach, and tell you to brush your teeth at night, right? Like you go and you do it. You don't even think about it.
There'd be a lot of issues if that was the case.
right, exactly. You get to that point where it's something that you just do. You don't have to think about it. And a lot of people think that like this idea of default actions is the same thing as discipline, and it's not. I tell guys like obviously you still need layers of discipline in your life, of course, but default actions themselves are not discipline, right? Like I'm not sitting there like, damn it, Joe, you got to go to the gym, man. Like no, dude, you just do it, right? It's just a natural occurrence, it's a natural action that you take subconsciously. You don't have to think about it. Right now, when you sit down to eat, right, when I look at my plate, if there's not protein on it, I feel funny. I'm like, this is weird. Like this is something wrong, because you've now established that default action nutritionally of like, I need to make sure that I have protein on my plate. I need to make sure that this is a balanced meal, something that's actually going to nourish me. And you get to the point where once you've done it for long enough, If you sit down and you just see a plate full of just only carbs and fats, you're concerned. If you see somebody else's plate has that, you're concerned, right? Because that default of making sure you're getting enough protein is just so ingrained in your mind, you don't even have to think about it. It just happens. You just do it. And that's literally what a default action is.
Well, especially just getting into protein a little bit, especially when you realize that how much protein keeps you full, keeps you focused, and can help you sustain through the day.
100%, right? It is the most satiating macronutrient that there is, right? There's a hormone release when you digest protein. It's called leptin, and it literally is the hormone that makes you feel full. And so that's one thing there, right? It makes you feel more satiated. It's also the building block for muscle in your body, right? So you need it for muscle, and then obviously if you're getting more muscle, you increase your metabolic burn at rest. So now you're burning more calories at rest. Literally, while you're sleeping, you're burning more calories because you have more muscle. All these things are downstream effects of having adequate protein in your diet.
Yeah. And, having the right source of protein, the good protein, the good source, and everything is just all vital. Because how the body and the mind works is that if we don't eat right, we're going to feel sluggish. Like, I think it's going maybe like just throwing out ballpark numbers, probably about 8 months since I last had fast food. So again, originally, if we're talking about default actions, originally it was like I had to tell myself, I would literally verbally say, it's like, nope, that's gonna make you sick, that's gonna make you tired. And now I can drive by any of them and just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, totally, right? 100% of the time. And it's one thing I was thinking about today is too, because I grabbed Chipotle real quick before this. I'm not gonna lie, man. But don't worry, I got the double meat in the bowl, everything. So I made sure I hit all my
those guys protein. Right? We're good.
Right, there we go. Right, double protein. Right?
One guy, don't worry about
right. But it's one of those things too, where I'm in the same boat as you. Where it's like I can't even tell you the last time I had some kind of fast food that was like a McDonald's or Wendy's or something like that, because it's just it's not even appetizing. Once you eliminate it from your diet, like it's not even an appetizing thing anymore. Like you literally don't crave it when you drive by it because it's just not appealing to you anymore, because your body is now used to having nutritious foods, real foods from the earth, things like that, and it's literally not even appealing to you when you haven't been ingesting it regularly. So it's one of those things that the further and further you get away from it, the less and less that you crave it.
Yeah, and the better you feel. I mean, the better you sleep, the better your skin looks,
everything.
More energy that you have, and can go up and do stuff like today. This third podcast for today, and had about 4. Well, actually, made 6 days because I was gonna have like one remainder. I'm like, might as well make 6.
Yeah, right.
Ate 5 of them, so close enough. But it's like having that extra energy to really go out and accomplish stuff.
100%, man. It's fuel in the gas tank at the end of the day. Like that is our gasoline. It's food, right? So you want to make sure that you're putting the premium in, man. So I tell people, I'm like, it's literally that simple. If you frame it in your mind as that, it makes things a lot more simple, because you realize I'm like, okay, if I'm putting quality things out, I'm going to get quality, or putting quality things in, I'm going to get quality things out. Right. And it really does come back to that principle. In my opinion, it is that simple. When you can frame it in your mind as fuel, as a source of energy, you're going to change the way that you look at food, and you're going to change the way that you behave. Now, obviously, food is a massive part of culture, right? And you've been through the program. You know that one of the things that we preach on is like, you don't need to be a robot, right? You don't need to completely eliminate fun foods and going out to eat and hanging out with friends and doing all that stuff. You can still do all that stuff. It's just, if you're going to do it, you have to be tactical about it. Right. You need to
which is why I love that you guys discuss and use this all the time, is the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. And it's something that's so simple. It's not groundbreaking, right? Everybody that's been around fitness for a while or followed fitness resources online for a while has heard of the 80-20 principle. You might have even heard of it for like life. And it's not a groundbreaking thing, but it's a thing that when you actually learn how to apply it, it's one of the biggest game changers for our guys outside of just the high protein diet in general. The next biggest thing on nutrition is learning how to do the 80-20 principle effectively. And when you can live like that, and you can make sure that 80% of the time you're eating those clean foods and whatnot, you're going to be in a very, very good spot. And you're going to have the freedom and the flexibility to go out and 20% of the time have a little bit more of the fun food, the food that's maybe not so clean. And enjoy those social gatherings, because it's a massive part of culture. That's reality, right? Think about every major holiday. What do? You eat. Hell, on the Super Bowl, which is a major holiday in America, right? You're literally eating the best,
especially when you got 2 great teams. Going to the Eagles, and I believe the Chiefs are in it.
Yeah, man, 100%, right? That's why it was fresh on my mind. I'm like, that's next weekend, man. It's fresh on my mind. So, yeah, dude, it's one of those things where like we never have told a guy that comes to the program like, you can't eat this kind of stuff.
Right.
It's just, you have to do it tactically. You just have to be aware of it, and you have to make sure that you're doing it responsibly. And that's where a lot of people mess it up. They mess up the 80-20 principle because they think 20% of the time means you just do whatever you want and eat as much as you want. And they're completely irresponsible with the 20%. I'm
Right.
like, well, if you're doing it like that, it's probably more like 60-40, man. Right. So you still do have to be tactical and responsible with it when you're doing those things. But yeah, those are the big principles that help our guys nutritionally. It's the high protein diets and it's the 80-20 way of eating.
Yeah. So how many clients do you typically handle in, like, let's say, a given week?
In a given week, it depends week to week. I mean, I'd say we typically onboard anywhere from like around an average of 5 to 10 a week is typically how many we
Okay.
onboard. In live capacity, I know right now we're like around 120. So around there for live capacity, obviously, as we continue to grow here and add more coaches to the staff, you can just hold more and more um, current clients, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, it depends week to week, right? It's ultimately the nature of marketing and the acquisition world in business is some weeks are
Right.
slower than other weeks, because we don't do like a rolling cohort. I know some companies do a cohort of like we only take 5 people a week or something. We don't do that. We have open enrollment. That's our marketing model, our acquisition model. But some people do rolling cohorts. We don't. We have open enrollment. So some weeks it could be 3 or 4. Some weeks it could be 7 or 8. We've had as many as 15 in a week.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of depends how things shake out on the acquisition side.
No, that's awesome. It's a lot of lives that you're being able to make an impact in and to really help them regain a lot of that confidence, help them, lose that weight. And I mean, I'm again being part of the program, seeing so many
Mhm.
people like losing weight, like 5 pounds, 10 pounds, you
Mhm.
know, 4, 5, 10% of body fat, and just feeling so great and actually being able to do something they never done before. But that's playing with their kids, and that's why I think your program, and that's why I invited you on, is because your program is effective. It really helps a lot of people because it doesn't just tackle, the fitness aspect. It tackles the family. It tackles the mindset, and just overall, like, you know, typical things like, what do you see your life down the line? Do you want to be the same way you've been and, be happy with that? And if you are, okay, but do you want to do better? And most people are like, especially in your programs, like, you get people who actually want to do better, who actually are tired of living their life a certain way. So that way they can take responsibility for it. And that begins with your health.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because if you go through it and you've been through it, there's no
Yeah.
like direct content on how to improve your relationships or your family life or things like that. There's no content that's
Right.
directed towards that. It is all directed towards fitness. However, the principles that we teach guys to apply in fitness, they quickly see the parallels in other aspects of their life, whether it be, their wealth or their relationships.
Correct.
I kind of lump life into those buckets of like health, wealth, relationships, right? And so they see it being applied to those other parallels even though we taught them it in a fitness capacity, they see that it quickly just transitions to the other stuff too, and they use it in their day-to-day life with their career, with their loved ones, with their kids, with their wives, etc. And
Mhm.
it's a nice byproduct of the systems that we have here and the psychological frameworks that we give people. And so it's very fun to see that happen, and it's very fun to see that happen because it's not direct, right? Like I was saying, it's not a
Yeah.
direct thing that we teach. We don't directly teach guys how to do parenting or how to do
Correct.
relationships, but they see all these things with default actions applying to those areas as well.
And that's what's so cool about things and about principles and applications. Because if you do one thing in your life, you can easily apply it to another part of your life. So if you kind of found yourself just going home, and let's say you just went to the gym, then you go home and sleep and didn't hang out with anybody, and you don't want to do that anymore, then it's like, oh, okay, every time I go home, I can't sit down because I know the moment I sit down, I'm gone.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and you start to recognize patterns, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what default actions are, right? Is they're patterns of behavior, they're subconscious habits. 40, it's something like 40% of the things that you do every day are unconscious. You don't even think about it; you just
Right.
do it. There's some statistic out there for that. I'm sure you can find different numbers, but that's usually the one that we've circled back to. It's like 40% of the things that you do every single day you don't even think about,
Well, it's
and
an easy
that's
number,
really
number versus 65, 70,
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And so it's those things that you're talking about, right? Where you come home and you just do it. You're not thinking about it. It's just a
Right.
habit that's
Exactly.
developed over time because you were consciously doing it in the beginning. And then over time, it's just become more and more ingrained at a subconscious level to the point now where it's something you just default to. You don't have to think about it, it just happens. It's literally getting to the point where it's almost out of your control because it is subconscious. You don't think about it, you just do it. And unless you consciously make an effort to switch it and you consciously go through the process of changing default actions and changing your habits, it's not going to change. It's just going to keep happening exactly how it's been happening for weeks and weeks and sometimes even decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know you guys have like really impacted people who are like in their 40s and 50s, and you get that one guy says like, I'm the old man in the group.
Yep. Yep,
So it's like,
it's interesting. It's interesting because I think a lot of people's like misconception as well is, um, I don't think it's just in fitness or in our company. I think it's just in life in general. Like people, the older they get, they tend to think it's going to be harder to change, and maybe it will be because they've just been ingrained deeper. But it doesn't mean it's
yeah,
impossible. It doesn't mean it's impossible. You're just going a little more uphill than the other guy, but it definitely doesn't make it undoable. We've had guys in their late 60s come through the program and see amazing results.
nice.
So I mean, it's not undoable. Maybe
Right.
you're up against a few more years or a few more decades of negative default actions, right? And it's going to be a little
Right.
harder to unwind those habits, but it doesn't mean it's not doable. Doesn't mean it's not doable.
Yeah, and that's again, but that's just going back to that again, default action, the mindset. It's like, oh, I'm too old about this. I know you're
Mhm,
not quite 30 yet. I know you still got quite a few years left, but
mhm,
as someone who would be turning 30 soon, a lot of people would be like, well, my life is basically over at 30. Like, and I'm like, why? And again, some of these people are not the healthiest.
mhm,
I don't know if they have any, unknown medical challenges, but just that mindset's like, are you kidding me? I'm excited to be 30. I'm glad I'm not like 20 when I was 22, when I was 23, when I was 25. So it's like, because the older you get, the more wiser you get. And the older you get, the more life experience you have. And you have the opportunity. It's like, am I going to complain about this? Or am I going to make these things better? And it's getting rid of that mindset. In psychology, they would call it fixed mindset that it's too late. It's like, why try? Why bother? It's like, no, like, come on now.
mhm,
You got so much more potential in you. You just got to draw it out. And that's what I think you do very well, Joey. Like you draw like that out of people of
mhm,
that, like they can do it and they can achieve it. And you guys are upfront. Like it's gonna be hard. It's not gonna be fun. But if you
mhm,
put in the time, the effort, and the work, you can achieve anything. And like you easily have that. Like you have that natural charisma about you to pull people in.
mhm. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. I think it's something that we've landed on as well, and like we lean into, me, Jack, and Gabe lean into for sure, is because we've recognized that in ourselves somewhat, the ability to bring that out of people, and so something that we definitely lean into now heavily. And the longer time goes on, we lean more and more into it, right? So doing stuff like this, getting on a podcast and talking and speaking is fun for me. This gives me energy. A lot of people, this wigs them out. They're, oh, I'm going to go on a podcast. I'm going to speak in front of people, and it's recorded. And if you mess up, like you can't get it back. And it's all this stuff that used to be super stressful, and it's stressful for a lot of people and used to maybe be stressful for me as well. I was telling a buddy about my public speaking class my freshman year of college, how I like bombed one of these presentations and everything. And it used to be something that stresses me out a ton, but I've just learned that the skills that we've developed with it just through coaching is something that's super impactful, and it would almost be a disservice to people for us to not get on shows like this, to not
Right.
create content, to not coach. It would be a disservice to people, because we realize that we have an ability to do that and to draw that out of people and draw that emotion, and get them to take action.
Right. Well, especially with you starting your own YouTube channel as of late too.
Yeah, yeah, dude, that's super cool. I've been doing it kind of like the slow, steady start. I'm just being consistent. I'm doing it the exact same way I did Twitter. Like when I started Twitter, I was like, okay, I'll tweet like once a day, once
Yeah.
or twice a day. And slowly as time got on and it became more and more ingrained, now it's, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day, a year and a half
Right.
or 2 years later. Same thing with YouTube. I'm like, I'm all right. I'm just gonna do one video a week for now, keep it going, get a few shorts dropped in there and just slowly scale it up as we have more and more manpower and a bigger team to be able to kind of leverage that channel there for content. So yeah, man, it's super exciting stuff, and I love podcasts. Like I've been doing more and more of these. I hired a podcast setter as well because I just want to get on more and talk to more people and do this more, because this is stuff that does genuinely give me energy, right? I don't look at a podcast on my calendar and go, oh no, I have a podcast. I go, hell yeah, I got a podcast. This is gonna be fun, man. So
Oh my
yeah, I
God.
like doing this stuff.
Well,
Yeah, I
especially when
love.
you find people that you have like a similar like personality, energy with too, where you can both kind of pull each other like in to like have like a hypeness to it, a realness to it, and just like have like an authentic conversation. That's why I love doing these podcasts and hearing so many stories, because it's like there's so many guys, as obviously our main source right now is Twitter, of how many guys have transformed their lives, who went from drugs, dad bods, what have you, to complete 180 in their lives. And it was I started with the decision being, I'm done. I'm done being this way. And even if it takes me 5, 10 years to get where I want to be, that's what I'm going to be.
Mhm.
So
And it does start with that. It starts with a conscious choice to make change. And it's one of these things that you see me put out in content all the time, and you
mhm.
see us talk about it all the time when you're in the inner
Right,
circle, is you have to take action.
right,
Literally nothing matters. You can watch your YouTube videos, your motivational TikToks and all this stuff and read all these quotes and read all this content. And you have all these inputs coming in, which is good, which is better than having bad inputs. But you're not actually going to see any kind of tangible progress with your life and with success unless you've actually acted on the inputs and the things that you have and the information that you've gathered. You're literally doing what I call mental masturbation. It just feels good. It's just getting a big dopamine hit. I read this book and I heard this stuff and I did this. I watched this YouTube video and he said, if I do this, this, and this, well, did you do it? Because if you didn't do it, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
If you're just sitting there listening to it and you're sitting there watching the next Hormozy YouTube video for my little young entrepreneurs here as well, if you're just sitting there watching it and not doing anything, nothing's going to happen. You have to actually act on the information that you've gathered. And that's the separator. And it goes through every aspect of life is you actually have to act on what you've acquired.
No, that's a very interesting concept that, that mental masturbation, I know, I think I've heard you mention like when just maybe in your tweets or something about that, but it's so true and that's why this whole podcast is focused about men of action. Like, again,
Yep.
it's, you read a book, awesome. The more books you read, the better you're going to be. But then again, it's having that knowledge piece. So that's why it's so important to differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. It's good that you have all the knowledge of the steps that you might take, and you might love like the 5-step process. For people who love Dave Ramsey, might love his 7 baby steps because they're very succinct and easy to follow. But unless you really start to apply it, you're not going to get wisdom. And wisdom's the application of the knowledge. And that's what I think a lot of people kind of need is more of like, okay, cool, I have all this information. How do I do it? And that's why I see like a lot of people get stuck is they don't know the how. Mostly because they're focused on I can't do this. I can't save $1,000. Like Dave Ramsey, I can't save $1,000. Versus what I like about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, his book, where he talked about instead of asking, it reverses like, how can I? And when you make that just that ever so subtle switch, your mind begins to really begin to go into problem solving mode.
Yeah. And some people are that type where it's paralysis by analysis.
Exact, 100%.
They get stuck. They get stuck thinking about the how to. And something that I've seen with a lot of guys, just the deeper and deeper we get into the business world, the more successful guys that I see, a lot of them, they don't have plans.
Right.
Like they just started something, man. Or they have a new thing that they're starting and they don't really know how they're going to do it or how they're going to get there. They just have a vision, they have conviction in their idea, and they just start working towards it. They're like, okay, what's the first thing I got to do? Well, I got to do this. And they just do it and they worry about the next steps as time passes by. They don't sit there and try to map it out point A to point Z. Right. They just go. They just take the first step and they just keep putting one foot in front of the other, put out the next fire, solve the next problem, build the next thing. And you do that repeatedly over and over for the rest of time, whether it be with your health, your wealth, your relationships, your business, whatever it may be. If you just keep doing that for an extended period of time and you're consistent every single day, you wake up and you get better a little bit, just a little bit, do one thing to get better. You're going to be in an unbelievable place within a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Think about how much progress you make over this long time period. And that's where a lot of people also, in my opinion, go wrong and maybe go into paralysis by analysis, is because they're so focused in the now. They don't look at life on an extended time horizon. Me, Jack, and Gabe, when we're talking about plans of our business, we're not talking about this month or this quarter or this year. We're talking about 3, 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah,
100%. You just have to look at things on a different time horizon, and it makes your life a lot less stressful, one, and you're a lot less scared to take action because you know, hey, man, I'm playing a long game. For us with our business, we know we're playing a 10-year game. If we make this change and hire this thing and build this role or make this investment and it goes wrong, so what? We got 10 years to fix it.
Yeah.
So when you start playing on a longer time horizon, that helps a lot of people out as well. I know it helped me out because I used to be the guy that was super stressed out and paralysis by analysis because I was playing in the short term. And when I started playing on the long term, things changed for me. And I was able to go through life with way less stress, at least in my business life.
Yeah, what's an example of that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think it was just really as basic as it sounds. It was just problems that would arise or things that we wanted to try that we were maybe nervous or anxious to do, and we just wouldn't do it. Or we just stare at it. Are we going to do it? I don't know if we should do it. Well, I don't know. No, just do it. Just try it. Because the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work. That's literally the worst thing that can happen. It doesn't work.
Sure.
And so you just fix it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's really what business is to an extent, or at least business ownership is to an extent, is you're problem solving. You're problem
Right.
solving. And if you want to grow, like we want to grow, you're going to have problems. And so you just have to accept the fact that really your role within the company as a business owner is to solve those problems and keep growing and keep planning. And when we
Exactly.
accepted that and we realized that we have 10 years to do it, it became a lot easier and a lot more comfortable to make decisions that we weren't sure of, that we knew were riskier, but had a high reward on the other side of it. For example, like we had to fire a whole sales team once, the entire sales
Oh,
team.
wow.
We got rid of all 3 reps and we brought in all brand new reps. And they ended up tripling the business.
Nice.
But most people wouldn't do that. Most people would be
Right.
like,
No,
oh, you got to get rid
you're
of the whole
right.
sales team. And it was not fun. It was awful, especially for Gabe, our sales manager. It was awful for Gabe. He's the sales guy. So he had to take a
Ooh,
whole lot of calls and everything, right? And he had to do a whole lot of hiring and a whole lot of interviewing and a whole lot of training.
right.
But after that short-term discomfort, we came out on the other side way better and way bigger and made more money and changed more lives than ever. And it was something that was an uncomfortable decision, but we realized if it went wrong, so what? We have so much time to fix it. We have literally
Yeah.
10 years to fix it at least. And we just started playing on a longer time horizon. So we were more willing to make risk, quote unquote, riskier moves that might be really risky in the short term, but you give us enough time, we can solve just about any problem if you give us enough time, and we have plenty of time. And once you
Oh,
realize that, it becomes a lot less stressful.
yeah. And I like your idea of, now you have now by unfortunately by the whole sales team,
Mhm.
now you know what kind of person not to hire. Now you have a
Yeah.
little bit more fine tune of like early signs and indicators to look for. Have you
Mhm.
ever read the book The New 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Dr. Spencer Johnson?
I have not. What is it called?
It's called The New 1 Minute Manager.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna check that out. That's
Yeah,
cool.
you gotta check that book out because it talks about 3 key secrets
Mhm.
into like how to be like a good business person,
Mhm.
like how to actually run an effective business. And it's cool because it's a story. It's not like a step one, you do this, 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 and this. It's the application of the steps built into it through a story of a young guy who wants to be a businessman going and talking to basically a CEO and learning how to do business.
Super cool. Super
So
cool. And what you're saying is true too, where we got reps hiring and firing, because firing is part of owning a business too. You're gonna have to
very
fire
true.
people sometimes. Nature of the beast. Unless you hire perfectly for from start to finish, which would be amazing. That would be a miracle. I don't know if I've ever heard of that, but firing is part of the process too. So we learned how to hire, we learned how to fire, we learned how to train, we learned how to build better systems as a result of the hardships and the things that weren't so good and the things that didn't really pan out. It gave us repetition in terms of doing those things that are just natural parts of owning a business that you just have to learn how to do. And we learned. And I was on a podcast last week and we were talking about this idea, me and the host, we were talking about this idea of like, do you hate losing or love winning? And I was
Ooh,
like, man, when I was playing sports, I hated losing. But when I
yes.
got to business and more life stuff, I don't hate losing
Hmm.
because ultimately you pull lessons from it at the end of the day. So I don't hate it. It's just part of the game. I used to though when I was younger, when I was playing sports, I hated losing. That was my motivation every game. We can't lose.
Right.
Now I'm like, oh, dude, I just love winning. And if we lose on the way there, we lose on the way there. It is what it is. Ultimately, we're going to win as a result of literally having losses under our belt. We're going to win more long term because we've just learned more. We've taken
Exactly.
more shots. We've taken more shots to the chin, man. We know how to take it and move forward and apply those lessons. So as long as you're applying the lessons and pulling lessons from those losses, I think losing um, can be a net positive if applied correctly because you
Oh,
learn.
no, it absolutely is. I have a family member that taught me that they've learned more from their failures and mistakes than they have from their successes.
Yeah,
So just
yeah,
that whole like one word statement speaks volumes where it really talks about figure out what you did wrong and then do everything you can not to make the same mistake. And there was a monk on Mulligan Brothers, I want to say,
hmm
that he gave his like it was a really cool idea of like what a mistake is. He said everyone is going to do something wrong. That is
hmm
not a mistake because you have an opportunity to correct it.
hmm
He said the mistake is from the unwillingness to learn from it
hmm
and then repeat it over and over again. And I really like that kind of concept of a mistake because it really speaks volumes of there's some level of you that's unwilling to learn from the situation that happened. whether someone stole money from you, whether someone wasn't a good sales rep, or there you found out someone was slacking in their hours. Because imagine that.
Yeah,
So
exactly, man. Exactly. And if you can, as long as you can pull from it, right? That's the big thing. Where a lot of people, where they mess up losing, and I can understand why you would hate losing if you're somebody that just like sits in your negativity and just sits there, poor me, poor me. If you do that, of course you're gonna hate losing, dude, because you're not getting anything from it. But you can literally force yourself to pull a lesson from it and apply it and move forward. Something that we started saying. I kind of started actually it didn't even start as a joke. It was just something that was like totally outlandish that we said. When bad things started happening in our business, we randomly just started saying like we've been blessed.
mm,
It started out kind of as like jokingly or loosely, or
right,
like when it was said the first time. I remember it was a big thing. Like we just lost a bunch of money. This is really the short and narrow of it,
right.
right? We lost a bunch of money. And we were like, And Jack goes, "We've been blessed. This is good. Like, let's move forward. We learned our lesson." And now we say it dead serious. It started as like kind of outlandish claim. He was like, "We've been
Right.
blessed." I'm like, "How have we been blessed? We just lost tens of thousands of dollars. This is not a blessing." But when you start thinking about it, he was right because we learned from it and we applied it. And so now when kind of crazy things happen in the business, we're like, "Oh, we've been blessed. We've been blessed. We just learned a lesson. Now we're just going to move forward." So that little mental reframe has helped us a bunch, and I know it'll probably help some of the people that are listening to this as well
I
if they
was gonna
start
say
applying.
Jack has such a strong mindset of things. Like he
He's
really
crazy,
does.
bro. He's crazy. I love him. I love that guy, man. He's crazy. He's crazy in a good way. That's why he does all of the psychology type of coaching within the program. We do the group calls. We do 20 a month now,
Oh,
and he
nice.
leads the psychology one. So yeah, he's the man when it comes to mental frameworks. He's the guy that I point everybody to, is Mr. Black.
Well, hey, he has read Psycho Cybernetics, so
Yeah, exactly, dude. He could co-author that book now at this
he
point.
could.
At
He
this
could.
point,
I'm sure he could.
at this point in time, he could co-author it. But yeah, man, he's the man. He's crazy. I tell everybody when they have like mental framework questions within the program or anything like that, or if we're on another call and they ask about it, I'm like that's a call for Mr. Jack, man. He'll be able to give you the highest level answer possible because that guy's got a steel mind.
Yeah. No, he really does. I mean, you guys all really vibe well. Like I said, all you guys pictures and like how you guys just like communicate and talk with another one, even like when we're doing group calls. You guys just like all like really vibe well. Truly.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And it's something that we've again like we just put a lot of time and effort into it, man. We put a lot of time and effort into the relationship because ultimately a business partnership is a marriage. No matter how you
It is.
swear it is, you have to work on it. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And I'm not married, but I know people that are married and they've told me all these things. So I am kind of regurgitating a bit here, but I'll frame it from my business partnership perspective. But it's not sunshine and rainbows all the time, right? Me, Jack, and
Right.
Gabe, we argue, we fight, we have
Right.
disagreements. It happens. It's just part of business. And we've literally worked with marriage counselors on our business relationship.
Mm.
And so we've invested a lot of time and money and effort into our relationships because we know at the end of the day, if we don't have our friendship and we don't have the relationship, we don't have a business. So we know
Wow.
that priority number one is each other and managing that relationship and making sure that that's straight away and making sure that we're brothers first and we're family first. And we build a business as a result of having that quality relationship and that foundation laid.
I think I've never heard of that before, and I've been doing this for like talking to a whole bunch of people for a while now, and I'm around like a whole bunch of people just naturally. I've never heard of business partners like either going talking to some like a third party. I'm sure it happens all the time, but just to be that intentional about your
Mhm.
friendship, about your brotherhood, and about your relationship. I mean, you guys are like the highest like men of action people, like truly who go the extra mile to really take care of each other. Because you're right. In any business, and whenever there's two people, there's going to be a conflict, unless you want to be by yourself, and then eventually you're going to have conflict with yourself.
Yeah. Or you're gonna get bored and you're gonna try to start something new and burn the current thing to the ground. That's what I usually see happen is they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm bored now." Well, of course you're bored. It's just you doing it. You have no team. You have nobody to bounce stuff with, man. Like we have me, Jack, and Gabe. We're accountable to each other. Like, so what if I'm bored? I got to make sure that Jack and Gabe are taken care of and we keep building this business. Gabe feels the same way. He would say the exact same thing. And I know Jack would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So one of those things is like that actually keeps us accountable and keeps us on mission because we know there's two other guys on the other side of it that we're taken care of by everything that we do. Every little project we work on, if we're ever struggling to work on a project, we think about each other.
Yeah.
Right. We think about putting food on each other's table because at the end of the day, you have to keep working. You have to.
Oh, I love that. I love that concept because mostly people would be, gotta make sure I have food at my table versus gotta make sure, food's on the other table. So that speaks volumes of your your friendship, your brotherhood, and just as partners and people just doing life together.
Yeah, man, it's amazing stuff. And the older and older we get too, um, the more and more that becomes real. I mean, Gabe's
Yeah.
engaged now, man. Gabe's engaged, man.
Oh,
He's got a family, right? Like it's a different frame of mind now because it's not just Gabe. It's like Gabe and his family. We got to make sure that they're taken care of. And
right.
as me and Jack get to that point in our personal relationships and stuff, it's going to be the same exact frame. And it's a truthfully, it's a each other first business model, and it's served our relationship well.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad that you guys just continue to guys just do well versus the, I remember when I was in college and when I would have issues with some of my friends, and I had a race relation class I had to take,
Mm-hmm.
and I put it, and I during the speech I said this: we love like brothers and we fight like brothers,
Yeah.
and that's how like if I consider some of my brothers, like I know that we're gonna love each other, we're gonna be there for each other, even if we're upset with each other, but we're gonna take time to actually resolve whatever issues going on, and because obviously that's at the most important thing you could ever do.
Mhm. I think this was Jordan Peterson I heard say this recently, but he said something along the lines of conflict unresolved is conflict multiplied.
Yes.
So if yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like something he would say, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's true. If you just let
Yeah.
it fester, and we've learned that lesson. Me, Jack, and Gabe
Yeah.
have learned that lesson because every single one of us three have gone through a point in time where something was wrong or something happened and we didn't voice it and we let
Yeah.
it fester. And after a few months of letting it fester, we came to the table and it was a big deal that we had to solve. And luckily, we've now all had kind of our oopsie with that, right? Like Jack's had his, Gabe's had his, I've had mine. And now we all kind of are very transparent about the fact, like, if something's going on, bring it to the table. It doesn't matter how small it might be or how silly you think it might be, because we need to address it. Because if we let it fester and you let it fester, um, it's going to multiply and it's going to be way worse than it maybe ever had to be. So,
Right.
we kind of have that hard and fast rule now of if there is conflict or there's something that is under your skin or bothering you, bring it to the table.
Yeah.
Bring it to the table, right? And another thing that's helped us too, and I think would help a lot of people probably um, in marriage and in business is if we don't agree on something, we don't do it, right? If it's all in or all out, right? If two of us agree and one of us disagrees, we don't do it until it's all three of us are in. We do not make that decision. We do not move forward with that idea or that concept. We beat it until we all agree.
Up, Joey. As you clear a definition of a man in action who doesn't like to be on the sidelines but actually in the field, what is something you want to leave off with people today?
You're better off to act when you're unsure than sit there and suffer from paralysis by analysis. Just act, man.
Ooh.
Don't be unsure. Don't worry, brother. Don't worry. It's gonna work out, right? If you just start acting on the thing that you want to do, eventually the roadmap will lay itself. You are far better off taking action than sitting there and waiting for the perfect plan to happen. Because in reality, no plan is perfect. Every plan is flawed. You just can't see it yet. So I think that is probably the perfect thing to leave people off with for this specific podcast is like you have to literally act. You have to, because that plan is not going to go how you think it's going to go. So you literally have to get in the field to see it play out.
That's right. Do what Joey said. Get in the field, take action, take one step at a time, one day at a time. Have a blessed day. This has been the Men of Action podcast. Hope you guys have a blessed day. Bye.
Hell yeah.